Well, hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Scott Glazier. I am one of the ultrasound fellows at Massachusetts General Hospital, here to give you another case of ultrasound successes. Again, this is another case where point-of-care ultrasound made a difference in the patient's care in the ED. This case, however, is more of a diagnostic additional helpful tool as opposed to a method that impacted the patient's treatment. We'll go over why the patient's treatment didn't change based on the ultrasound findings, but for the most part, it was very helpful to have point-of-care ultrasound at the bedside. The story from this case is that this gentleman came in with a chief complaint of section 12 and tachycardia. He was recently seen in the hospital and was discharged and was here at MGH to follow up with his psychiatrist. When he was there, they took some vital signs and found that he was tachycardic, so they sent him to the ED. What we know from this patient is that he has lymphoma, HIV, and that 5 days ago he had a pericardial effusion for which a window was required to drain the fluid. Unfortunately, this gentleman is nonverbal at baseline, and so it is difficult to get a history from him. In terms of vital signs, he had a heart rate that was 125 and a blood pressure that was 119/69. So as I was doing my scanning shift with my medical students, we were doing an educational shift, I was asked by the attending who was running the pod that day to do a bedside echo. And I'll tell you, it felt pretty good. I felt like he asked me personally to do a test that he felt would make a big difference in the patient's care. Though, to be honest with you, any of us could have done this ultrasound, and it turns out it was my medical student who did the ultrasound. Anyways, as we were rolling the machine, the patient was rolling into the bay from triage. And so pretty much ultrasound to patient time really took 30 seconds, and this was the first thing that we did for the patient. And as the nurses were putting the patient on the monitor and getting an IV, this is what we saw. So you can see here, this is a good parasternal lawn view, left ventricle here, and you can see that you have the free wall here compared to the septum isn't moving too well, and that the ejection fraction is diminished. This is another view here, kind of the same thing, septum moving pretty well, not necessarily the free wall. On the parasternal short here, you can see kind of a similar thing where this is contracting much better than over here. So clearly, with both the parasternal long and parasternal short, you can see that there is a wall motion abnormality. When you do it here on the 4-chamber view, it's another view that you can see that the septum is contracting okay, but that for the most part, the free wall isn't as good as you would like. When you compare it to an echo that one of my colleagues did in June of 2013, you can see here that both areas of the left ventricle are moving a little better than what you saw. You put the two images side by side, and I know they're different locations. This is a parasternal lawn, this is a subxiphoid. When you compare the two, you can see that this wall here is moving much improved than compared to over here, and so that this finding is most likely acute. 2 hours later, I took another group of people to ultrasound, and it was a couple of residents. We decided to ultrasound the same patient. Now, we'll go over why, with this type of ultrasound, he's still in the ED and not in the cath lab later. But for now, for teaching, here's what we saw. And so you see this image here, and it looks similar from prior, except you have a free wall here that is really not moving at all. And also to note is this mild to trace pericardial effusion here. But really notice that this wall isn't moving. You put the two side by side, and this is the one I took, and this is the echo that was taken 2 hours later. And you can see that this is moving slightly improved compared to this. However, both are pretty diminished. Using a cheat sheet from the ultrasound podcast, you look at the various walls and you try to see which distribution this could be. And if you look this wall here, here, and here, all three correspond to a circumflex infarct. And so in 30 to 60 seconds before an EKG was shot, we had a diagnosis of a cardiac infarct. Once we had this information, we talked with healthcare decision makers, and it was decided that since this patient's critical illness of both HIV and terminal lymphoma, he was more of a comfort care type of patient. It was decided not to take him to the cath lab and to manage him medically. So that's the case. Hope it was helpful. Just another reason and method to illustrate how ultrasound can be beneficial at the bedside. Please email us at mghedus@gmail.com with any questions, any feedback, and hope you enjoyed the case. Thank you.